Premanandi.
Hari Hari
All
Bol.
glory to Shama devotee.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to Shama devotee.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to Shama devotee.
Hare
All glory to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Sri Prabhupada. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 6, Chapter titled, I Have Done My Part. The Dhruva and Yatra pilgrims were mostly villagers. Many were from Rajasthan, men and women wearing bright colored clothes, and the women wearing heavy gold and silver bangles and bracelets, which clanked as they walked barefoot on the roads. The numbers of mendicant sadhus also increased, and they became a common sight with their ash or clay-covered bodies marked with brightly colored tilak. The Jamuna had flooded in many places and was too swift for bathing or swimming. Thousands of visitors came to the Krishna Balaram Mandir, which was now one of the most popular temples in all of northern India. The evening arti at Krishna Balaram was so crowded that resident devotees couldn't attend, but could only stand in the back of the courtyard at the edge of a packed, jostling crowd. Some of the Gurukul boys would greet the guests with Hindi Back to Godhead magazines, each boy selling 200 or 300 magazines a night. Srila Prabhupada was glad to hear this. A few of Srila Prabhupada's disciples from the West also arrived just to be with him, hoping to render some menial service. When Prabhupada received them in his dark, cool quarters, he was sitting up on his bed. One of the arrivals, Madhudvis, had left Krishna consciousness for more than a year, but now came before Prabhupada shaven-headed and wearing Vaishnava tilak. Don't leave us, said Prabhupada feelingly. You can stay as Grihastha, but don't leave us. Madhuvista Maharaj was a sannyasi. And now he's coming back as a Grihastha. Grisatru, Prabhupada said, I like your magazine, Back to Godhead, especially the article Srila Prabhupada Speaks Out. That was one of the features in the Back to Godhead magazine. Srila Prabhupada Speaks Out. Shrutikirti, who had come from Hawaii, showed Prabhupada some candles they were producing and selling. And Prabhupada laughed. You Westerners, he said. There is no scarcity of money, but now I have taught you how to spend it. For more than half an hour, Prabhupada went on talking pleasantly. Later, Tamal Krishna told the devotees that Prabhupada's outlook seemed to change depending on the people around him and the news he received. And he told them of Prabhupada's plan to go to the West. That evening when Srila Prabhupada called for Tamala and the others, the devotees gathered and went up to Prabhupada's balcony, not knowing what to expect. Srila Prabhupada was lying on his bed. Sit down, he said. I want simply to see you all. It gives me vital force. Mercifully and lovingly, he looked upon his devotees as they sat around him. The air was filled with frankincense billowing from the pot of coals Upendra had prepared to keep the mosquitoes away. All these places that we're reading about, when you go to Vrindavan, you'll see Prabhupada's house. To access the balcony, you have to go into the garden, and then there's a staircase going upstairs. So Prabhupada's quarters, he had different times. So whenever he wanted to be warm or in the sun, he would go up to the balcony, which is the second level. In India, they call it the first floor. Ground floor is just called ground floor. First floor is the next floor up, not second floor. So he had two bedrooms. He had one bedroom downstairs in the back next to the garden, and then he had another sleeping area upstairs. And then, at a certain point, we moved a bed into his sitting room, which is where you see it now. And then he left until he passed away. That was where he was. The evening arti began in the temple, and the sounds of the kirtan rose to the little balcony. One by one, the men present began to massage Prabhupada. Shruti, Kirti, and Hansarupa each massaging a leg, while Tamal Krishna massaged Prabhupada's head. Another devotee fanned. Prabhupada lay back with his eyes closed peacefully. You are all Vaishnavas, he said. Be merciful to me. Srila Prabhupada frankly wanted to hear good news. It inspired him to continue. He didn't want to hear other news. The secretary would read little letters in the afternoon, and Prabhupada began allowing the other devotees to be present. Once when they entered his room, he said, if in this world there is one Vaishnava, he can deliver all the world. You are that one Vaishnava, Srila Prabhupada, said Satsu. You become, said Srila Prabhupada, each of you, why not? We can try, said Guru Kripa Swami. Yes, try, said Srila Prabhupada, but follow, do not imitate. Today we have a letter about book distribution, said Tamal Krishna, the monthly report. That is the real good news, said Prabhupada, and he listened with full attention as Tamal Krishna read the BBT newsletter. He was pleased and absorbed, sometimes shaking his head and smiling to hear the achievements of his disciples. Then he heard a long letter from Ganesham is Bhakti Tirtha Swami, about his triumphant book distribution in Eastern Europe. When he heard a letter from Tulsidas, who was developing a Krishna conscious farm community in South Africa, he commented, this letter makes my chest swell that I have such disciples performing such activities. In another letter, a devotee wrote a prayer stating that all his godbrothers were praying for Prabhupada, and he hoped that Krishna would respond. Surely, said Prabhupada, I am practically living on your prayers. I haven't eaten in the last 6 months, so I must be simply living on your prayers. And hearing in a letter from South America that devotees were praying for him, he said, I think I will have to stay. Krishna is very kind. He is Bhakta Vatsala. So many devotees are praying. It cannot be frustrating. I think this is why I am feeling inspiration to go out. In this condition, anyone else would prepare for death, but I am going on a tour. I don't think of it as sentiment. Krishna is actually present as the Krishna conscious movement. Krishna is actually present as the Krishna consciousness movement. I am now without Vrindavan wherever I go to our temples. Panchadevita Swami wrote that he would exchange his youth to Srila Prabhupada's old age. We are the same age, said Srila Prabhupada. The body has nothing to do with the Atma. In the Vaikuntha world, we are the same age. New life, new boy, never yovana. The outward dress does not affect one. As a further reply to Panchadevita, Prabhupada dictated, may Krishna give you long life and preach Krishna consciousness. You are our future hope. For the devotees who had not been with Prabhupada in months, it was like old times, sitting with him and hearing him answer letters and give advice for becoming victorious in Krishna consciousness. Hearing him discourse made everything all right. But as they were leaving his room, he said softly, these are my last days.
That looks so ugly.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Oh my God.
You got it all figured out there?
Nope. We don't. We're struggling today. That looks like a samosa.
Again, look at this.
Lovely.
Where's the other mic for questions?
No questions today.
We'll have to,
It's there. Okay.
we have to assign somebody to put the ribbons back in the book. Yeah.
321:52.
$21, 52, 54?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
You broke it? It's okay. Do we need this?
Yeah, for the online, otherwise it won't work.
See this tape right here?
Yeah. We'll take that.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Read from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 21st chapter, text 52 to 54, chapter titled Conversation Between Manu and Kardama. We'll just read through the Sanskrit and then come back to select a verse to chant together. Nayadara Samastaya Jaitramani Ganapitam Vishpurat Chandako Dandoratena Trasayanagam Swasanya Taranat Shurnam Mipayan Mandalan Guvaha Vikashan Brihatim Senam Parayatyan Sumaniva Gadara Sedavat Sarve Varnashamani Bandanaha Bhagavad-Gita Rajan Vigyaran Bhattadasivi. We'll just chant the first little bit. Nayadara Tamastaya
Nayadara Tamastaya
Nayadara Tamastaya
Nayadara Tamastaya
Jaitramani Ganapitam
Jaitramani Ganapitam
Vishpurat Chandako Dando
Vishpurat Chandako Dando
Ratena Trasayanagam
Ratena Trasayanagam
Nayadaratam Astaya
Nayadaratam Astaya
Jaitramani Ganarpitam
Jaitramani Ganarpitam
Vishpurjak Chanda Kodando
Vishpurjak Chanda Kodando
Ratena Trasayan Aghan
Ratena Trasayan Aghan Nayadaratam Asthaya Nayadaratam Asthaya Jaitrang Mani Ganarpitam Jaitrang Mani Ganarpitam Vispurja Chandako Dando Vispurja Chandako Dando Rathena Trasayan Aghan Rathena Trasayan Aghan Nayadaratam Astaya Jaitramani Ganarpitam Vishpurjak Chandako Dando Ratena Trasayan Aghan
Nayadaratam Astaya
Nayadaratam Astaya
Jaitramani Ganarpitam
Jaitramani Ganarpitam Vishpurjak Chandako Dando
Ratena Trasayan Aghan
Ratena Trasayan Aghan Nayadaratam Asthaya Nayadaratam Asthaya Jaitramani Ganarpitam Jaitramani Ganarpitam Vishpurjak Chandako Dando Vishpurjak Chandako Dando Rathena Trasayan Aghan Rathena Trasayan Aghan
Nayadaratam Astaya
Nayadaratam Astaya
Jaitramani Ganarpitam
Jaitramani Ganarpitam
Vishpurjak Chandako Danando
Vishpurjak Chandako Dando
Ratena Trasayanagana
Ratena Trasayanagana
Ladies.
Nayadaratam Astaya Jaitramani Ganarpitam Vishpurjak Chandako Dando Ratena Trasayanagana
Prabhu actually gave instruction that the verse should be chanted 10 times. So that's why I tried to
How many do we
get a good response. And it was. Na,
Not
yada,
Yada,
when,
ratam,
Ratam,
chariot,
the chariot,
Astaya
having mounted,
Jaitram
victorious,
Mani
of jewels, Gana, with clusters, Arpitam,
bedect,
Vishpurjat,
Vishpurjat,
twanging,
twanging,
Chanda,
Chanda,
a fearful sound just to punish the criminals.
a fearful sound just to punish the criminals.
Kodanda,
Kodanda, Bo,
Ratena,
Ratena,
in the presence of such a chariot.
by the presence of such a chariot.
Rasayan,
Rasayan,
threatening,
Agan,
all the culprits,
all the culprits.
Vasanya,
Svasanya,
of your soldiers,
Charana,
by the feet,
Shunam, trampled, Vepayan,
causing to tremble,
Mandalam,
the
the
globe,
globe,
Bhuva, of the earth, Vikarshan, leading,
Pratim,
huge,
Senam, army,
Paryatasi,
you
roam about,
Amsuman,
Amsuman, the brilliant sun,
Eva, light,
Tada,
then,
Eva,
certainly,
Setataha,
religious codes,
Sarve,
all,
Varna,
of Varnas, Ashramas, Ashrams, Nibandhana, obligations, Bhagavad,
by the Lord,
Rachitaha, created, Rajan, O King, Vidyaran,
they
they would be broken, but alas, thus you be
by
rogues.
Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhu.
Jai.
If you did not mount your victorious jeweled chariot, whose mere presence threatens culprits, if you did not produce fierce sounds by the twanging of your bow, and if you did not roam about the world like the brilliant sun, leading a huge army whose trampling feet caused the globe of the earth to tremble, and all the moral laws governing the varnas and ashramas created by the Lord himself would be broken by the rogues and rascals. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is the duty of a responsible king to protect the social and spiritual orders of human society. The spiritual orders are divided into 4 ashramas: brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. And the social orders, according to work and qualification, are made up of the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Sudras. These social orders, according to the different grades of work and qualification, are described in Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, for want of proper protection by responsible kings, the system of social and spiritual orders has now become a hereditary caste system. But this is not the actual system. Human society means that society which is making progress towards spiritualization. The most advanced human society is known as Arya. Arya refers to those who are advancing. So the question is, which society is advancing? Advancement does not mean creating material necessities unnecessarily, and thus wasting human energy and aggravation over so-called material comforts. Real advancement is advancement towards spiritualization, and the community which acted toward this end is known as the Aryan civilization. The intelligent men, the Brahmanas, as exemplified by Kardama Muni, were engaged in advancing the spiritual cause, and Kshatriyas like Emperor Swayambhuva used to rule the country and ensure that all facilities for spiritualization were nicely provided. It is the duty of the king to travel all over the country and see that everything is in order. Indian civilization, on the basis of the 4 varnas and ashramas, deteriorated because of the dependence on foreigners, or those who did not follow the civilization of varnashram. Thus, the varnashram system has now been degraded into the caste system. The institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas is confirmed herewith to be Bhagavad Rachita, which means designed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita, this is also confirmed, Chaturvanya Maya Shastam. The Lord said that the institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams is created by me. Anything created by the Lord cannot be closed or covered. The divisions of varnas and ashrams will continue to exist either in their original form or in degraded form. But because they are created by the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they cannot be extinguished. They are like the sun, a creation of God, and therefore remain. Either covered by clouds or in a clear sky, the sun will continue to exist. Similarly, when the Varnashram system becomes degraded, it appears as a hereditary caste system. But in every society there is an intelligent class of men, a martial class, a mercantile class, and a laborer class. When they are regulated for cooperation among communities, according to the Vedic principles, then there is peace and spiritual advancement. But when there is hatred and malpractice and mutual mistrust in the caste system, the whole system becomes degraded. And, as stated herein, it creates a deplorable state. At the present moment, the entire world is in this deplorable condition because of giving rights to so many interests. This is due to the degradation of the four castes of Varnas and Ashrams. Kalayadoshanidhi Rajanasti Mahagana Kirtana Eva Krishnasya Mukta Sanghasya. So this verse is quoted a few different places, but from the Brihanaradiya Purana, we understand that Kalayadoshanidhi Raja, that Kali Yuga is an ocean of inauspicious faults. Hardly anything can be said to be good about it. And as we could see, the degradation of Varnashram has resulted in so many difficulties that everyone is experiencing more and more as we progress in the age. Some of the symptoms of Kali Yuga is that there will be excessive taxation, that people will be working essentially just to pay taxes, and that there'll be very little to eat. There'll be restrictions. And these are all artificial. Obviously, the earth can provide more than enough for the so-called current population. Baba used to comment, there's no such thing as overpopulation. So many vacant areas in the world. What are they doing in those areas? They're growing, crops that are not edible. Coffee, tea, tobacco, millions of acres covered by these crops. And yet in some places people don't have enough food grains. So this is just one of the symptoms that we see in Kali Yuga. But as it continues, Astiyeka Mahagana Kirtanareva Krishnasya. There is one good thing, that in Kali Yuga one can become liberated simply by chanting Hare Krishna. So this is not some accident, that automatically happens. Kali Yuga, if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had not come to inaugurate the golden age within Kali Yuga, then Kali Yuga would have already been progressive. Just like when you enter into a season, you have winter, spring, summer, fall. It doesn't take long, it doesn't take 5,000 years to become spring. So when the ages have these transitions, when Kali Yuga advents, it's just like winter coming. Winter is here. It doesn't wait, it doesn't take all the way halfway through the time period to take effect. So Kali Yuga at the advent, all these things should have already happened. Manda Shamanda Matayo Manda Bhagya Upajuta, short-lived, unfortunate, everything, all inauspicious qualities. So how are we so fortunate? Only by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Guru Krishna Kripai Bhai Bhakti Bhakti and the spiritual master who has kindly brought him into the midst of Kali Yuga. Imagine Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared and he came across where? To the most auspicious place at the time. Bharata Bhute Manushya Janmohalaja. He came to India. But he didn't want to stay. It's predicted everywhere that this would come to the foreign countries, but nobody understood. in places like the Bhavisha Purana or other Purana. What did they mean by foreign countries? What was a foreign country? You know, these countries, in one sense, at a certain point, you know, the civilized world was just a contiguous landmass, Central Asia and Asia. Africa was not considered civilized. North America was not, certainly not civilized. You know? So what was civilized? It was a small area, technically speaking, a fraction of the landmass. All these other areas are nothing. But then we see what happened. The prophecy is also there that when Parashuram kicked out the Kshatriyas, he killed most of them, but many of them fled. And where did they go? They went to Europe. That was the break. And from Europe, where did they go? They came to America. And other places. So all these things are happening. This is not coincidental. You know, there's a tendency to look at things from a so-called historical perspective. But this is a transcendental movement. It has nothing to do with history, so to speak. And it's evidenced by how this movement has evolved at a particular time in a particular place, at just the right moment. You know, in some of the scholars associated with the Krishna conscious movement, they see things from a sociological perspective. And they say that had Prabhupada come a year earlier or a year later, it was possible this movement might not have taken place. So there are certain factors involved. So all these factors are arranged by Krishna for the pure devotee. Otherwise it would not be possible. When Prabhupada came to Brooklyn Marine Terminal, because he entered it in Boston, so that's where he cleared customs, and they asked him, how long will you stay? Everybody know what Prabhupada said? How long will you stay? 2 months. 2 months. So boom, they stamped his tourist visa, 2 months, with an anticipated date of departure. But then just at that time, in that interim, they relaxed the immigration laws, which had been in place for 50 years, that restricted Asian immigration. So when he came, just at that time, then he was able to get a concession, and he was able to let a travel freely. You know, so all these things, like I said, it helps us to appreciate the transcendental nature of this movement. Otherwise, sometimes we may be affected by sometimes seeing things from a localized perspective and seeing ourselves just as some participants in another religious movement. But this has nothing to do with this, with anything material. You know, and this is constantly, Prabhupada is constantly reminding us in various ways. And so we're very fortunate if we can keep this in mind, because what it will do is it will minimize your fears and your doubts about your participation in Krishna consciousness. That this is something that I'm going to put a time limit on, just like Srila Prabhupada, 2 months. We're not tourists in this Krishna consciousness movement. We're not here to take in the sights, become culturally enriched. I mean, what do tourists do? They go someplace and they think, okay, now I've seen the Colosseum, now I've seen the Empire State Building, now I've seen whatever, this place and that place. Okay, now I'm done. I've seen enough. So this comes from an unfortunate inability to grasp the transcendental aspect which can only be had by this constant association with transcendental literature and transcendental activities, like chanting our Hare Krishna obligation, right? For our continued purification and protection. So it's always nice to see the devotees who are taking their japa seriously, who come, sit, they're not restless, they're fixed, and they continue. And this will serve you in every situation going forward once you have that discipline. Because if you lack that discipline, if you think, well, I'll just chant later on my clicker, or I'll chant later when I have time, then this, what do they say? It's habit forming. It's habit forming. You become accustomed to thinking, I don't have to do this now, I'll do it later. But sometimes there's no later. Sometimes you'll be in traffic and you'll look down at your map and all of a sudden, boom, you're rear end in the back of a car. And that could be it. But Krishna will save you sometimes. And it won't be serious. But that doesn't mean it's not serious. You look at the newspapers and you see all the time it's fatal accidents. So nobody knows when their time is up. And these little things are just reminders for us to be serious. Not to get distracted. It has nothing to do with our current activities. It has everything to do with our long-term commitment and obligation. All these other things in between, they're not. They're just constant reminders. There's in Madhya Lila, Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Sanatana Goswami, calls it the process of devotional service. It's an interesting way to view it. That it's not just something haphazard. That there's a protocol that should be followed, must be followed, in order to achieve the desired success, just like we chant in the morning, in order to quickly achieve the desired result. Krishna Prema, it's not. So we're constantly looking for an opportunity to continuously connect, to maintain that connection, so that it doesn't become interrupted by anything. Just like you see people walking around looking for the Wi-Fi signal. They're going from here, they're going from this floor, they're going from that floor, and they're looking at how many bars, what do I have? So everyone is concerned to maintain this connection. But what is that? What is our Krishna conscious connection? What is our transcendental network? How does that appear? So that is this ahoitikiya pratiyata, yayatma suprasidati. Only this uninterrupted, unmotivated devotional service can completely satisfy the self, atma suprasidati. Otherwise there's no connection. Just like when I walk out of the range and it tells you you're out of range. So we have to have that sense in our mind that when am I out of range? What am I doing at any given point? Do I have my connection? With the spiritual master, with his instructions, with the mission. Like Prabhupada's saying here, essentially he's saying, I am ISKCON. And it may seem like a casual statement to many people. Just some hyperbole. Bill Gates might say, I am Microsoft. But this has nothing to do with some material achievement, self-aggrandizing, attitude. This is a transcendental movement. Golokara Prema Dana Harinam Sankirtan. It comes from the spiritual world. It's presented by the emissary, the ambassador of the spiritual world. And it's being given to us in an unadulterated way for us to accept or not. And if we choose to accept it, then everything is there in that presentation. The spiritual master is not giving you something incomplete. Everything associated with this movement is perfectly complete, just like the Supreme Lord. Om Purnamadak Purnamidam. Perfectly complete. But we, imperfect souls, conditioned, imperfect senses, tendency to make mistakes, cheat, and otherwise, we fall short. And in order to maintain that pure vision that allows us to keep that connection strong, we have to be continuously engaged by this conscious endeavor. We call it Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada said, at least be conscious. He said many times different things like that. At least be conscious. And conscious means of your activities, of your actions, of the results of your actions. You have to see, what are they? They're very fond of saying in the material world, different little epithets that sometimes make no sense. Sometimes you have to think about it for a while. Look before you leap, different things, You say, well, what does that mean? Well, obviously it has meaning, otherwise it wouldn't be such a common saying. And nowadays with internet and TikTok and YouTube, you'll see many situations where people do foolish things that had they just considered for a moment what the result would be, they'd still be alive. Hanging off the edge of a building to take a selfie, and what do they have? Their famous last moments, why? So don't be one of those famous last moments thinking that I will do something and, whatever, falsely think that Krishna will protect me, or just that, it's just going to be a momentary situation. I've seen so many momentary situations turn into permanent disappointment. Just, and if you have any length of time in the movement, you'll also see and hopefully learn, what to do, what not to do. And this is one of the symptoms of advancing in spiritual life. And Krishna makes it clear that those who are not connected, with the mode of goodness, they don't know what is to be done or what is not to be done. And so at least we should have that sense and be able to examine all of our actions from that perspective. And it's not, we don't want to get too much into it, but obviously, whatever you do has an impact on everything and everyone around you. So you should be considerate, and you should be conscientious. And that should be at every single level of your activity, not just in your personal actions, but your interpersonal actions, your external interactions. We're dealing with the public. We're supposed to represent something special. And if we're not considering it something special, then how will they see it? Vaisheshika Prabhu said that people see it in your eyes. They can tell. If you can't make eye contact, if you have no confidence, you're not self-assured with regards to your position within this society and the movement, then why would they buy this product from you? Why will they think that Krishna consciousness is anything different from what they're doing? So we have to have that sense that we're very fortunate, obviously, that we're giving something very special, obviously, and that it will benefit this person. I want to speak of benefiting me, but that's not our primary consideration. I'm not thinking this will benefit me. I'm not thinking I will get my name at the top of the Sankirtan newsletter. These things are there. It's not a bad place to be, in one sense. Everybody has that, likes acknowledgement, but we're not seeking it out, as as a standalone achievement. You know, actually, it's a reflection on the spiritual master. As you see that Prabhupada was so happy by seeing his disciples engage in such a way. He was happy to see the Gurukul boys distributing Bhakti Gada. He was happy to read the book results from the Sankirtan newsletter. It was making him happy. We opened up in Mayapur. Prabhupada has an Almira, and in that Almira, in his room, actually it's underneath. Has anyone been to Mayapur? Who's been to Mayapur Prabhupada's room? Only one person. Only one fortunate person has been to Srila Prabhupada's room in Mayapur. Okay, Prabhupada has a front room, a sitting area where he would greet guests, and he had a back room, which was his bedroom. Okay, and I've said this before, on his bedroom wall there's only one deity picture, a deity picture of Radha Govinda. Okay, it's very special. Prabhupada is very much connected to New York. Underneath, and the original deity of Mayapur is called, who knows what the original deity of Mayapur is called? Before any of the other deities, Radha Madhava, Mayapur Chandra. And Mayapur Chandra was what they euphemistically call a doll. Cow dung, straw over a wire frame. Beautiful deity. You see this deity, you immediately understand the devotion that was infused by whoever the artistic personality was, and by the worship that was performed, and by his appearing at that place at that time. So he was originally worshipped. They had a nice, so he was appeared, he was presented to Prabhupada, then they created a small little hut. And then eventually he was retired, because you cannot daily dress such a deity, because it's just clay, cow dung, and wire, so it breaks. And so they said, Prabhupada, what should we do? Usually you just throw these deities, these dolls, they're only meant for festivals. Like Durga Puja, they make thousands of these murtis. And then at the end they retire, they throw them in the Ganges. So they said, Prabhupada, what should we do? So Prabhupada said, you bring him to my room. So since that time, he's sitting in Prabhupada's room. Right? Most beautiful deity. I can distribute a picture later after to the residents' chat. Right? But underneath that deity table, next to that, there's an Almira. And inside that Almira, locked Almira, Prabhupada's Almira, where he kept his things, there was a trunk. And so at one point, myself, Harisari, Janani Vasi, we decided we think it's time. We should open this trunk. Nobody's ever opened this trunk. Why not? It's like a treasure house. What could we find in there? So we opened up the trunk, and inside wasn't anything that you would immediately jump out at you. A sweater, some other clothing, and there was a binder in there. Two things. So this is Prabhupada was last in Mayapur in early 1977. But from the contents, it was appeared to be from probably Mayapur of 77. There was a report from the Radha Damodar RDTSKP, Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party. And the binder, one of my godbrothers, Rajendranath, was the accountant, bookkeeper. Amazing detail, fold out, big ledger. You open up the binder and the pages fold out. All the details for the entire year, whatever was collected, whatever books were distributed, everything, every single expense down to the penny. Then this was the party led by Tamal Krishna Goswami and Vishnu Jan Maharaj. And so Prabhupada thought that was important enough to be in his trunk. Safe, locked up. The other thing that was in there was the report from the Prabhupada had renamed the farm to Gita Nagari. Previously it was New Varshana. So the farm, when we purchased it, was New Varshana. And then Prabhupada renamed it when he went there in 1976 as Gita Nagari, the village where the Bhagavad Gita is sung or spoken or lived, practiced. Okay, so that was in there, that report. So those 2 binders were in there along with some clothing like that. Some other little paraphernalia. Prabhupada would keep pens and toiletries. But he derived pleasure from this, from what? From the spreading of the movement. To seeing his disciples engaged in these transcendental activities. He knew that even if we didn't know that they were, or understand they're transcendental, he could understand what was happening from a perspective that we can only hope to achieve at a certain point, where we don't see things according to our limited perspective as, my interrelations with a few devotees here and there, but a global perspective where we see how it's possible to push this movement on and expand it, more and more. There's still a few places, right? What are those places? China. Very difficult. There's a few devotees who are working, very difficult, without being tossed into prison. When I was there years ago, and I spoke to the devotees, many of whom had already been imprisoned and then released. It's just mind control and manipulation. Basically, they told them that we don't consider you a threat as yet. We don't consider you as a threat. Falun Gong was a threat, organized. Falun Gong was a person who had received Prabhupada's book and decided to make her own religion from Prabhupada's books. Combination of philosophy and yoga. Huge religion. Somehow or other, Chinese person could do it. We need such a person to convert them to the actual Srimad Bhagavatam. Their books, even, I saw one of the books, the cover was the cover of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Completely just copied, 100% copied from that. Very popular, but it's not our book, but it's got our cover on it. Dust jacket. So what the secret police told these devotees, it said, we wait for the pig to get fat and then we slaughter it. So that's what they did with Falun Gong. And if you openly practice that, they put you in jail and harvest your organs. So not a very nice thing to happen. So China is the last place. And it will probably be some time. And who knows what Krishna's arranging. No need for speculation. But, without any doubt, Krishna will arrange for it to happen, one way or another. But it may not be the way we expect. But we shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised. And therefore, we should always be prepared. Like Prabhupada, when they asked Prabhupada this question, they said, what should we do, Prabhupada, if, World War III comes, bombs start dropping? Prabhupada said, you go in the temple room, you chant Hare Krishna. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? If you run, you'll only die tired, right? That's the famous line. If you run, you'll only die tired. So we have a very simple task at hand, which is just be prepared to do the needful. Nothing else. Every day the opportunity to do the needful arises, whether it's a simple thing inside the temple or something special outside the temple to rise up to the occasion. You never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to influence. There was that article in Dandavat. It's an old article. It's the story about a book distributor in New York gave a Bhagavad Gita to a Burmese businessman. Burma is now called, what? What do they call Burma now? Myanmar. So you can tell from the story that it was a little older. So this is just, you're on the street, you distribute a book, you distribute a Bhagavad Gita. You used to flip open the book, right? The more you show, the more you sell, right? He flipped open to the pages of the Das Avatar and he showed them, because Burma, they're mostly Buddhists or Muslims. So he showed him the picture of the Das Avatar, he showed him a picture of Lord Buddha. And so this person bought the book, thinking it's about Lord Buddha. When he got back and he looked at the book and he said, this is not about Lord Buddha. It's a Hindu book. So then this doctor gave the book to a Hindu friend who happened to be a doctor. And then the Hindu started reading the book and he said, this is not about Hinduism, this is about bhakti. And so he just left the book in his office, along with, you go to a doctor's office, what do you see? Magazines, just junk magazines, But his son, so years are passing, this is all going down. His son the doctor's son wanted to learn English. He happened to be in his father's office and he saw the English book, big, thick English book, and he said, I'll learn English from this. He'll sit there with a dictionary, go over So he read the first 6 chapters, learned English, and became a devotee. And he was the devotee who essentially established a foothold, because there's always, you have devotees who go there to preach, who sometimes they're foreigners. Then you have a native person who takes up the task, and he's able to do more because he understands the culture better. And they built a beautiful temple there. Very nice temple. And they made so many devotees, all from one book distributed in New York City. Thousands of people became devotees. Temple was built. So don't underestimate or misunderstand the effectiveness of this transcendental literature. For whatever reason, if you're feeling disappointed that I'm not distributing anything, you should just take it as a sign that Krishna wants me to try even harder, not to become discouraged. Manushanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaya. One out of many, one out of thousands, one out of hundreds of thousands. But Prabhupada came to the city because it's concentrated. He came to New York City because everything is here in close proximity. Very easy, and we saw the result. And so that's why he declared that New York is the most important city, the most important project. Because what happens here affects the whole world. It already affected Burma. Next, it will affect China. So many books have gone into China. We've pushed so many through Hong Kong, through this place, through that place, to Taiwan. Translation. They're there. They're even printed in China. The books, many of the books, printed in China. So automatically or accidentally, the books are available, but not the same way that we're thinking, but they're getting there. So gradually the influence will take place. It's just a matter of time. We don't know if it's 100% true, but at the time when Prabhupada was sending Tamal Krishna to China, Tamal Krishna just to Jumna, he said, and it was very difficult, and the other devotees had gone before to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong was a British protectorate, so it was easier. But even that was somewhat difficult. But you could take a ferry into China like that, but not much success. So Prabhupada, it was said at that time that Prabhupada had told the devotees, he said that they'll be the last to come, but they'll make the best devotees. Maybe he just wanted to give them some encouragement that to continue pushing, because it's obviously the hardest place. Russia was not anywhere near as hard. And you can see the results. But China, it's been so many years, still nothing significant, not a single temple. If you try to have a meeting at someone's house, the secret police are everywhere. We had one meeting one time I was there. Immediately there was the devotees who had held that meeting were advised that we're watching you. We know who you are. We know all of you. That's how they intimidate you. Like that. So, it's not, they mark you. when you go in, anyway, however it works. It's almost a badge that you get, like I'm banned from going into China. What's it? Because I was there and they marked me. So at least until there's a computer crash or something changes, somebody else will have to try. So all these things are going on, and someone can internally say, okay, I'm going to go to China. I'm going to do it for Prabhupada. I'm going to go shoot the rhinoceros. All right? This was, have you read that book? Chasing the Rhinoceros with the Swami? Yeah? No? Prabhupada encouraged his disciples to do big things, not small things, big things. And these are all young men, and he sent them everywhere. He encouraged them to do these things. So we want to see that everyone has that attitude. It has nothing to do with age, Prabhupada said. It's not seniority, it's sincerity. He was sending these people, they're young. We were young. But we were ready, in the sense that we would do anything for Prabhupada. So you have to have that attitude, that to be ready to do anything, to do the needful. Otherwise, it's not a question of age. When you read the exploits of previous generations, good or bad, geopolitically or not, they call these people the greatest generation. Why? Because they were sent off to war. They were 18 years old. They were officers at 19. They were flying bombers at 20. What do you see 20-year-olds doing around here? They're on skateboards. They're smoking blunts. They're useless. Not that making war is necessarily a good thing, but the fact that they were able to step into those positions and do those things, that level of accomplishment, there's something to be said about that. You're always in the face of danger. So what's our danger? There's danger. You go on the subway, you can get shot, pushed on the tracks. No devotee should really be going out alone. Everyone should always roll heavy. It's not subways are not the safest places in the world. Crazies, all the crazies hang out there. Right? Anybody not know that? Just in case, I'm just saying, you never know. Somebody just comes from someplace else. They may not realize that since time immemorial, all the crazies hang out in the subways. We encountered them in the 70s, and they're back. They're back. So many lost souls. And as Kali Yuga progresses, there'll be more and more. It's just the way it is. So we should be cautious, try to influence those who can be influenced and avoid those who cannot. It's not a rocket science. We don't have to go into it. There's so many Sankirtan stories of devotees in New York City having to defend themselves in the New York City subway. And hopefully that's because we almost exclusively, for years, just did Sankirtan in the subways. And only book distributors, there was a difference. The book distributors would go to Port Authority. We didn't have airports at that time. They would, go to certain places. Airports came later in the 70s, early 80s. But for us, in those days, Port Authority was the only place above ground. All the rest of our activities were essentially in the subways or on the street, but you didn't distract. In the subways, we collected for building, for the Manhattan building that we eventually purchased, for the Gita Nagari farm, for the Vrindavan temple, for the Bombay temple. It was all going on from collections with paint buckets. Just nickels and dimes. But 100 devotees out in the subway every day collecting nickels and dimes, it adds up. You'd be surprised. You'd be very surprised. You can ask me later how much we collected. So we're a force, and when we act with, and of course, the devotees at that time, Prabhupada was giving them this inspiration. He had so many projects. And we knew that to please Prabhupada, we wanted to make his projects a reality. So Bombay, Vrindavan, the farms, Gita Nagari, the New York Temple on 55th Street. So we wanted to please Prabhupada. It's a simple thing. We want to please Krishna. You want to please the Guru. You have to make the endeavor. You have to make the effort. It's not going to happen just by doing the mechanics, of bhakti. You have to get above that level. The enthusiasm has to be there. The real enthusiasm, which comes from a genuine emotion, of affection for the deity and the Guru. Otherwise, it won't take place. The determination won't take place. Right? Resolute determination. You see why Krishna is very exacting in his words. He's not saying it the casual determination. He's saying the resolute determination will not take place. You may get some determination temporarily, because you feel a little bit enthused temporarily. But if you want resolute determination, then it has to be continuous, vyavasayamika buddhi, one-pointed. You have to have focus. It has to be there. In everything you do, everything you read, has to come to that, produce that result. Otherwise, it's not working. That atak pumbir dvijasheshta varnashama vibhagasaha sunustata siddharmasya sangsiddhir haritosham. It has to satisfy Krishna. And the opposite of that is what? Shrama eva hi kevalam. Useless waste of time. What are they saying in these verses? What's a useless waste of time? Reading Srimad Bhagavatam, reading the Vedas? How are they saying that a person could be a Brahmin and be wasting his time? And we're reading about the varnas and the ashrams, and Prabhupada's describing here that there's degradation because the qualifications are not being developed. It's just hereditary. So that can infect even in the Krishna conscious movement. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Harinam Chintamani, and there's a few things, and it seems incongruent. He's writing at a time when who would he be instructing? Who would he be telling these things to? But he says that you should be cautious about two types of devotees. Do you know what those two types of devotees are? Kali Chela. Kali Chela. Kali Chela is an agent of Kali in the guise of a devotee. It means tilak, kantimala, everything is there. But they're agents of Kali. Why? Because they're acting against the propagation of Krishna consciousness. You will encounter, maybe you didn't know the term, but you will see it at certain points. The other one is Dharma Dwaji. Interesting term, Dharma Dwaji. What does Dharma Dwaji mean? Flag of Dharma. Someone who's waving the flag of Dharma. He's wearing devotion on his sleeve, as they say, like that. Like a rubber stamp. He's just waving the flag. I'm a devotee, I'm a devotee, I'm a devotee. But what does that mean? You have to act as a devotee. Otherwise, what's that? Anyway, otherwise it becomes a disturbance in society. What's that verse? Ihayasya harya dasya kamana manasagara. Anyway, I'll remember it after class. Basically, it becomes a disturbance in society, and that's what these people are. One actually has the capacity to destroy a society from within. Kali Chela, person. And the Dharma Dwaji he's a distraction. He adulterates the mission by being a pretender, being someone who's not effective He's not actually acting any interest. He's just taking up space. So we want to be effective instruments, as Krishna requested Arjuna. Nimitta matram bhavasavi. You want to be an effective instrument. A hammer that's broken is useless. It's a paperweight. Can't use it for anything. Can't use it for its intended purpose. So don't become a paperweight in Krishna consciousness. Become an effective instrument. We want to do something to save the world. We can't just talk about it, and eulogize it, and just, use these words, and they have no meaning, just to whatever, make an impression on somebody. They have to see you doing it. They have to see us out there every day chanting the holy name. They have to see us out there distributing these books. Then we're fulfilling the mission. Any questions or comments or corrections? Dr. Ryan? Correction? Oh, okay.
Question. So you're talking about uninterrupted, unmotivated devotional service is how we keep our connection to this realization that everything that we're doing is transcendental. And of course, if we don't have that realization, then everything is mechanical and we are not actually effective in any of the activities we're participating in. So how is it that connection, how do we get out of range sometimes? Sometimes we're in the connection and then it's like we lose the connection and then it feels like it's become mechanical again. And then maybe the connection comes back. I mean, is it just that we're not paying attention properly? We're not being conscious enough? Or?
Well, to some extent, you will get Krishna's mercy from your actions, not from your inactions. So if you're having, whatever reason, a lack of enthusiasm, Prabhupada gave a famous saying, it almost seems disconnected in one sense. He says, even if you don't want to dance, dance, and the bliss will come. So you put yourself in that situation where you're engaged in a transcendental activity, that you'll have a transcendental result. So that's Prabhupada's formula. Utsaha nishchaya dharya tatta karma vartanat. Enthusiasm, which is importantly the first ingredient of these activities. Utsaha nishchaya. So enthusiasm, firm faith, conviction, patience. So all these things are there. And sometimes patience is before firm conviction. Sometimes you get a glimpse of firm conviction, and then you have to exercise patience. Maya, she mounts a severe attack on you as you get closer to becoming initiated, or right after initiation. Because you've declared war. When you take initiation, you declare war on Maya. It's not that she's just going to sit back. If you want to make that, how can you say, attack, counterattack against Maya, because she's controlled our lives this whole time up until that point. And when we accept initiation, we're basically telling Maya, now I declare war on you. Okay? I'm no longer your servant. Now I'm serving my eternal master. All right? So Maya said, okay, we'll see about that. And then and who knows better than Maya what your weaknesses are? Maya's not just some external, the devil made me do it concept. No, Maya, illusion. We're living in her prison house. The material world is her domain. And so if you want to get out of it, you have to be able to demonstrate that your conduct becoming a liberated soul to get out of that prison house. But she's going to test you. They'll send something at you that, whatever your weakness is, you have to be prepared. And you can only be prepared if you've built up your arsenal, of strong sadhana, strong association, These two they can't be separated, like smoke and fire. They can't be separated. You have your sadhana, but sadhana alone is not sufficient because we are not in and of ourselves capable of, how can you say, liberation. Otherwise we wouldn't need the guru or anyone else. So you have to have the association of your senior god brothers, senior and equal, who can assist you. They can throw you a lifeline when you feel this weakness coming about you. Arjuna also had it, and Krishna chastised him. And where is this weakness coming from? So it comes because we've lost touch with our actual nature, our spiritual nature. And so that, the more we engage on that level, then the less we'll be affected by Maya has no access except through your material activities and your material consciousness. So don't leave that door open. Don't think it's okay to think these things or okay to do these things, and that there'll be no consequence. You have to always be alert. What do they tell you in this? It's a common thing. It's called situational awareness. Just like when you're on the subway, you don't have headphones on, completely oblivious to your surroundings, so that somebody could walk up to you and just push you on the tracks. You didn't see it coming. Why didn't you see it coming? Because you ignored your environment. You're in a dangerous place. You maintain a certain level of awareness. You don't shut out. Sound is your protection. Your hearing is your protection. Otherwise, just like Maya can sneak up on you, so Maya's going to come in the form of some subway pusher. But it doesn't have to be that. It can be anything. I said, how many gateways are there? Why do we have the 4 pillars of sinful life? Because each one of them is where Kali has access to. Otherwise, Kali had no place to go, except where there's the hoarding of gold, there's intoxication, there's illicit sex, and there's gambling. So all those things. So, and that, thinking, feeling, willing, don't even entertain the thought. The thought comes immediately, discard it. Go right past it. Just like walking around some obstacle. The New York City sidewalks are filled with such obstacles, left by the 4-legged denizens. So you have to kind of look down and know where you're walking. So it's the same thing in spiritual life. You have to know where you're walking. Don't intentionally or unintentionally step into a pile of Maya. Any other questions? Yes, Mataji in the back. And then, but can you pass that microphone? You might have to press it on.
Krishna? Okay. I just wanted to share something that happened yesterday, actually. You were talking about how, China is kind of like this one last place that, Krishna consciousness hasn't really spread yet. And yesterday, actually, I was at the reception desk, and this younger Chinese woman came in the temple for the first time, and she didn't seem like she knew much, actually, but she was carrying like a bouquet of flowers, and she showed me this picture on her phone. It was like a small, Murti of Krishna, and she'd probably never seen deities before in her life, but she had this picture on her phone, and I was just kind of like, oh yeah, like this is Krishna. And so I, came into the temple. I said, the curtains are closed right now, but you can leave the flowers here. And she was, a little sad that the curtains were closed, but I, told her what times they would be open and everything. But she asked me, where can I make a wish? She didn't even know. And so I just said, you can still come and do this. And anyway, she came out there, after that, and I, gave her the other arti times and whatnot, and told her about lotus Lotus Room and Sunday Feast. There was a little bit of a language barrier, and I was also rushing a little bit to get to Maharinam, so I wish I had had more time to speak with her. But anyways, I gave her, one of those small packets of the prasadam, and she just started crying, and I just must have thought, like, wow, like someone must have like said something to her along the way and got her to this point. So anyways, I just wanted to share that because you had mentioned.
Yeah, this is a temple. We see that this is an oasis. People are dying of spiritual thirst. And sometimes they accidentally come. Sometimes they've never been, but they know that we exist, so they'll come. But however they come, as long as we're in a mood to share with them, you can see the result, that a permanent good impression has been made. And what do they say? You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. Everyone knows that term? You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So your first impression should be good, always. You can reserve judgment. That's our prerogative. But you never know who you're speaking to. I've told this story many times about, Robert Nelson. Prabhupada used to call him Mr. Robert. And he would visit Prabhupada up at Dr. Mishra's yoga studio. And so he knew Prabhupada. And when Prabhupada was on 72nd Street, living in his office, he would go to Prabhupada and help him. Prabhupada didn't have any disciples at that time. But, Prabhupada would say, I need this, and Robert Nelson would go get it, whatever it was, an alarm clock, a mattress, a type, whatever Prabhupada needed, he would somehow or other go and get. And Robert Nelson was what we would call in the old days in book distribution, a slow. A slow means someone who's a little bit maybe mentally challenged, but functional. Such a simple person. Sometimes Krishna puts a person like Jud Bharat, so that they're completely innocent. They have no consciousness of sinful actions. They're just too simple. They're childlike, you can say. And so Prabhupada used to call him Mr. Robert. Then when Prabhupada moved down to the Bowery, Mr. Robert disappeared. Maybe he didn't know where Prabhupada went. But for years, we didn't know who he was because, Prabhupada wasn't saying anything or telling anybody about this person. And then one night, closing up after the Sunday feast on 55th Street, we're already locked. Everything's done. It's late. I'm about to go upstairs. And I see this person knocking on the door outside. And so, we're ready to give people a plate of prasadam, just like here. You don't let them in the temple. I open the door, and this person is obviously a street person. And how do you tell a street person? They're wearing 5 layers of clothing. It's cold. It's the wintertime. So I let him into the foyer, just like this, but it's a much bigger foyer than what this is. It was huge. It's probably 30 feet wide or 20 feet wide, big double doors. So it's a big space. You could have 50 people in it before you actually enter into the lobby. And so I opened the door, and I said, Hare Krishna, how can I help you? And he said, is Swamiji here? I thought to myself, who could this person be asking for? He couldn't be asking for Prabhupada. I said, who's Swamiji? We used to call all the sannyasis at that time Swami. And, sometimes people would come and say Swami, meaning one of the sannyasis. I said, who are you talking about? And he said, Swamiji. Then I thought, okay, he must be talking. I said, you're talking about Srila Prabhupada, our teacher, elderly Indian gentleman? He said, yes, Swamiji. I said, this is just after Prabhupada left. As I told him, I said, Srila Prabhupada left his body a few months ago in Vrindavan. And his entire demeanor, it was like I had hit him with a sucker punch. He's completely distraught emotionally. You could see the tears in his eyes. And I thought to myself, who is this person? We've had other devotees, like Prabhupada's welcoming Madhavisa back after a year absence. So this is, he knew Prabhupada in 1965. And he said, now it's 1977, and he was nowhere in between those years, on Henry Street or on 53, So I asked him, I said, okay, well, then I opened up, we came in the second door. I told him to sit down. I said, let me get you some prasadam. And then I said, how do you know Srila Prabhupada? And he said, I was with Prabhupada at Dr. Mishra's. And I thought to myself, and Sadhguru Maharaj was just beginning to write the Leela Amrita. And I'm thinking, this is like, he knows more about Prabhupada than any even of the original disciples. Brahmananda, Sadhrupa, Chutananda, Mukunda. He knew Prabhupada before any of them. He filled in all this information. And so then Sadhguru Maharaj, we arranged an interview with him. Eventually, he moved into the temple here. He didn't move in. He didn't move in there, and he was a handyman. He came a few times on 55th Street. He interacted with Maharaj and some of the editors, and then again he kind of like dropped out. And then when we moved here, he was actually living in Brooklyn. I went to his place one time just to, for whatever reason, we had to do something because I was doing the construction. And then he eventually took initiation. His name, from a devotee named Vipramukhya. And he got the name Jagannath. And so all these things happen. Of course, we know sadhu sangha, sarva sastrakoi, lava macha sadhu sangha, sarva siddhi hoy. Who was this person? Who knows? But his attachment to Srila Prabhupada was genuine, and not just from this life. It apparently was from some previous attachment. And we sing, that just let me take birth after birth to serve the spiritual master. So we really don't know. But these people were there to assist Srila Prabhupada when he needed them. Even though it seemed like this person really didn't have a lot of competency. But the fact is, he was fixing pipes and electric. He would do a lot of things. Somehow or other, he knew what to do. He wasn't trained in these things, but somehow or other, he was able to do it. So all these different little stories are there, just how they all come together, how they become part of the history, of the Krishna conscious movement. And then of course Mr. Robert Jagannath, Mr. Nelson, he passed away some years back. I heard about it when I was in India. At that time, he had passed away, like that. And because I was there, I wasn't in contact with him. Otherwise, we were very friendly because I was the first person who had met him at that point. But so different things. So, like Manaji said, you never know who's coming in that door. Who they are, what they can bring to the society. That next person that comes in may be the person who from his previous life is up at that point, and he'll become the next sannyasi, the next Vartmanacharya. This is not, we have no control over this. This is all Krishna's control. We just have to try to facilitate. That's our duty, try to facilitate. Any other questions or comments? I hope you all experience these stories at some point so that you have a taste and that it produces a conviction the way it produced in our experience, that you see how Prabhupada's presence affected people in such a way that it's not material, and that these transcendental situations can only happen by the agency of a pure soul like that. There's sadhu, there's lava macha sadhu sangha. It doesn't happen. There's so many so-called sadhus, and they're, for better or worse, they're either Kali Chela or Dharma Dwaji. So you have to just kind of like exercise your discrimination and your discretion. It's very important to know who to associate with and how to associate with those persons. Many early disciples of Srila Prabhupada got lost in places like Vrindavan and Mayapur. associating with the wrong people, completely off the track. And now they've become like, well, you know, like whatever, nothing. Puna Mushtaka Bhava. They live in Vrindavan and they have long beards and they propagate environmental issues. You know, this is not what Prabhupada came to do. You know, save Vrindavan, stop plastic bags. He's an old devotee. I remember he had this whole meeting and all these big shots from Vrindavan are there. And, you know, and the big thing is we want to stop the use of plastic bags in Vrindavan. And I'm thinking, are you saying it just because it sounds nice? Or because it's easy? I said, because you have rampant, unrestricted development here. And these people who are in positions, they're part of, you know, the problem. They're not part of the solution. They're the people who sold Vrindavan and paved it and ruined it. And now they're worried about plastic bags. You know, it was, so you have to be, like I said, you have to kind of know what should be done, what shouldn't be done. And don't give a lot of interest in these temporary things. Plastic bags is not the problem. You know, overcrowding in the dam where people don't know how to construct proper septic tanks. You know, where the effluence penetrates into the groundwater through the aquifer. And you know, and it's incredible. If you want to go see what Vrindavan used to look like when we were there, back in the 60s and 70s, not the 60s, the 70s, you cross the river, however you do it, by boat or by car, over the Jamuna Bridge, and you go to the places where there's 12 forests in Vrindavan. You know, Vrindavan is one. Okay, and you go across the river and you have all the other forests. You know, so you'll see Vrindavan as it was previously, unspoiled, no development. You know, you can almost imagine Krishna and the cowherd boys playing in these groves and bowers, you know, along the bank of the Jamuna with the peacocks. You know? So you should go and see that. So you can have some memory of what or how Vrindavan was or is. Still some places like that. I pray that you get a chance to experience that. Any other questions? Now it's time. Look at that, 9:31. How did you let me go so long? Aren't you the one who's supposed to tell me? It's 9 o'clock. No, I'm only kidding. You're not doing your job, Bhakta Phil, the timekeeper. Okay, so we're going to break now. There's things to be done. Nata Bar has a whole day planned out for us. He's the coordinator, he's the master of ceremonies. Nata Bar is the master. Any question you have about the program today, I'll get with you in a second and help you with that. But today is a very auspicious day. It's the appearance of Jayapataka Maharaj. Yesterday was the actual day, but today we're celebrating. We had other celebrations yesterday. So we're looking forward to it. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Shivadha Govindadev ki.